BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, I'm George O'Neill and this is the Scottish Football Podcast. All the news, views and analysis you need on Tuesday the 29th of April. And today we're taking a deep look at the prospective Rangers takeover.
Not good enough. You can do as much work on the training ground, you can say as much things in meetings, but when you cross that white line you need to deal with situations within the game, and unfortunately we can't do that.
It's been a disappointing season on the pitch, but off it there could be a summer revolution ahead for Rangers.
Rangers have confirmed for the first time that they're in negotiations with American investors, including the San Francisco 49ers, about a possible takeover of the club.
49ers enterprises look to be heading to Ibrox in the summer. So what does the future hold for Rangers?
Overall, I've not really got any complaints other than the complaints about all football club owners, which are that they tend to want something back at some stage.
We'll speak to someone who knows what it's like to have 49ers enterprises in charge of their club.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
And I'm delighted to be joined on this very sunny afternoon by Chris Jack, senior writer with the Rangers Review, and Michael Normanton, editor of the Square Ball fanzine and co-host of the Square Ball podcast. Gents, thank you very much for joining me.
Pleasure.
No problem at all.
I was saying just before you came on, Michael, I'm in London actually. It's the first time I've been down since not far off a year ago, when there was a very different mood around Leeds United. Start by asking you if you're feeling a bit more human after the week that's gone at Leeds.
Oh, it's been a delightful week. I've absolutely breezed through it. I know there's still a title to win, and I do want us to do it, but the tough bit's always been getting up, hasn't it? So second place was always fine for me, but it's there to win, I think.
And a very different mood at Rangers, Chris. Especially, the last week sort of compounding what had gone before. I suppose the 49ers coming in would be that optimism that Rangers fans are looking for. So what can you tell us about where we are with that takeover taking place?
This is a story that's been on the go for several months here now. Talks have been ongoing for a couple of months longer than that, and hopefully we are in the final stretches of it. We reported on the Rangers Review a couple of months ago at the end of May, around about that time, was the kind of most likely point for this deal to actually be signed and sealed. There was official confirmation from both Rangers and the American consortium, which comprises of 49ers Enterprises and Andrew Kavanagh, who is an American health insurance tycoon. That was the first official confirmation that these talks were progressing, that they mentioned future investment in the club. I think when you get to that stage, there had been a bit of weariness among some of the support over the last couple of weeks. They were so eager for news and for an update and for this deal to be done. I think that perhaps calmed things a wee bit, just to let people know that it was still ticking along. And within several weeks, all being well, Rangers will have new owners, a new board, a new sporting director already in place, and a new manager will follow.
Yeah, you touched on the sporting director appointment there, Kevin Thelwell, who's joining from Everton. What do you know about his credentials, and what do you think that suggests about the direction Rangers are looking to go this summer?
I think one of the main points for supporters is he's a guy who has done the job. There has been a tendency at Rangers over not just last season, but previous campaigns of promoting from within and almost giving people a chance to kind of learn on the job to an extent. It's not really worked for a number of different people in a number of different roles. In Kevin Thelwell, they've got someone who has been in this particular role, whether it be at Everton, whether it be in America. He is a sporting director by trade. He has got a lot of experience in this particular role, and I think that's a kind of main point for supporters. They're not hiring, Rangers are not hiring someone hoping that they can do the job. They know that Kevin Thelwell has what it takes to be a sporting director. Now, whether he can be a successful one at Ibrox, time will tell. But I think he's coming into the club at an exciting time. He's coming into the club where there's so much optimism amongst supporters, a lot of hope, but also so much room for improvement. Recent seasons clearly not been good enough from a Rangers perspective. He's almost coming in with a blank sheet of paper and saying, you go and run Rangers. How do you see this football club in every aspect, top to bottom. You can go and run Rangers. So I think it's a really exciting time for him as well. He's been given a great opportunity here, and he will be given the backing to go and do the job as he sees fit.
And do you think these new owners will be coming into Rangers trying to slowly evolve it, or do you think they have to come in and try and effect an immediate sort of revolution, given, as you say, the lack of success over the last few years?
I think there's probably a bit of both. I don't see 49ers and Andrew Kavanagh coming in and just throwing money at it and saying we have to go and win the league in season one. We have to do this in season one. I think if you look at the way they have operated elsewhere, it has been a bit more of a gradual build-up. And of course, in Glasgow, second is last. And if you don't win the league, it's a disaster. Rangers fans will never accept not winning the title, not winning domestic trophies, and not challenging in latter stages of European competition. So they will come in with all of that burden and all of that expectation. But I do expect them to try and build Rangers up. As I mentioned there's so much room for improvement in so many areas. So it's almost a bit of both. They will have to make inroads very quickly. They will have to be successful early on. Manager and players, they're not going to get time. They're not going to get 12, 18 months to bed themselves into Scottish football. It just doesn't happen up here. But there will be a longer term plan for the club to grow and evolve as the investment continues.
And Michael, I suppose there's parallels to a point with when the 49ers came in at Leeds. They were very quick to move away from the previous regime and appoint new faces with experience. What can you tell us about those appointments and how they worked at Leeds and how they moved away from the previous regime?
I mean, they were in the building for a long time, obviously, alongside Andrea Radrizzani. They had smaller stakes and they kind of built it up to the point where they did take over. I think the kind of post Victor Alter era at Leeds, where there was not much power spread about, really. It felt like there was essentially, if it was a football decision to be made, Victor Alter was the man who did it. And now and then you got Rafinha. For the most part, it resulted in some quite erratic decisions, both appointing people like Jesse Marsh as manager, and you kind of credentials didn't quite seem to stack up. And then we did this thing of selling Rafinha and Calvin Phillips and investing it across a range of players, generally from a bit of a Red Bull model. So that they were all a bit of a gamble. There wasn't a hell of a lot of experience there. When the 49ers came in just by themselves at the point at which we are relegated, it did feel like that summer marked us just turning a bit more, doing some slightly more obvious things, I suppose, which to an extent you can see as being like, oh, this is a little bit boring, a little bit predictable. But, you know, getting Daniel Farke, someone who's won this league a couple of times, getting in people like Ethan Ampadu and Joe Rodon this season, Joe Rothwell, Jayden Bogle, people who you know are very much at the top end of this division. It just all felt quite sensible in a way. And there's been some gems in there as well, don't get me wrong, like the Autanaka is coming in midfield, a player from the second division in Germany. Probably none of us had really heard of him before, but, you know, so the scouting is obviously there in the background for all of this as well. But yeah, it just feels like they've gone about it in a way that is maybe minimizing some of the unknowns. So we've just kind of gone for the sensible things. And generally speaking, across the 2 seasons, you'd have to say it's worked pretty well. Missed out last year. Should probably have gone up with the squad we had, but then, you know, Ipswich had the season of their lives, and we never could quite catch them.
And Chris, I'm sure to lots of Rangers fans, a board that takes sensible decisions will be music to Rangers fans' ears. What will Rangers fans be looking for in a new manager? Is it one thing and one thing only?
It's the only thing that matters in Glasgow. As you know, they have to have a manager that's successful. You have to have a manager that is capable of not just winning big games here and there, but is capable of being consistent and capable of being successful. Every Rangers manager is judged on what do they win. So yes, the style of play is important. Yes, it's important to bring players through the academy. Yes, you have to entertain people. Ultimately, Rangers fans just want to win. They've not won enough over recent seasons, and I think they're looking for a manager who's something of a figurehead. They're looking for someone who represents the club in the right way. And you look at where recent managers have have failed. You look at where recent managers have succeeded. Steven Gerrard obviously been the last man to lead Rangers to a league title. He spoke and he conducted himself and he carried himself in a way that other managers over the last 10, 12 years or so have not done. And I don't think it's a surprise that Rangers were successful and they made huge strides under Steven Gerrard. The situation now, 7 years on from that appointment, I don't think it's as bleak. There's certainly a bit more optimism amongst the fans. There'll certainly be a lot more finance behind whoever the new manager will be than compared to what Steven had to work with initially back in 2018. But you're looking for someone to come in and have a similar approach and a similar impact. Rangers need almost pulled up from the bottom up, and they really need to. There's a lot of work to be done on this squad. So that's a big job, obviously, for the board, for Kevin Thelwell. The manager clearly have a big part in that. So there's a lot of boxes for the potential manager to tick, but most important one is to go and win titles.
Michael, you touched on the recruitment before under the 49ers. There's a massive rebuild that needs done at Ibrox, but last season Leeds lost so much talent, and so much talent in terms of capital as well as on-field ability. How impressive was the job that they did to move away from those sales and build a new team for Daniel Farke?
I mean, in some ways the recruitment was not as difficult as maybe it appears, because one of the players who left, the player who left for the most money, was Archie Gray, and he's last season he was a central midfielder, 17 years old, playing at right back, and he did incredibly well he played more or less every game for us. But I guess having a right back who's worth that much money in the Championship is not an option, and we were able to recruit Jayden Bogle for £5 million, who's truthfully is a better right back than Archie Gray. His ceiling is in a completely different place than Archie Gray's. I think Archie Gray has got, future international written all over him. I can see him going on to play Champions League football. I don't think there's any real cap on where he can get to, but I suppose it goes back to what I was saying about them just thinking, okay, well, if we get that money in, and who's the best Championship right back? Jayden Bogle, right? Just get him. And it's the same when we got Joel Pirro at the start of last season, who scored the most goals in the Championship over the last couple of years. Just get him; he'll be able to do it. And it's not all been completely plain sailing with someone like Pirro. He's had some dips, and people have questioned whether or not it's enough. But ultimately, he's going to finish this season 20 goals, load of assists, just really a really obvious and sensible bit of recruitment. I mean, the other players we lost Somerville, but we were fortunate enough there, I think, to be able to already have some strength on the wing position. So we already had Willie Nonto. We then added Manos Solomon, who's a player who came in with. We were probably quite lucky to get, truth be told, because he's got a lot of Champions League experience, played loads of international games for Israel, and he was kind of persuaded to come. I guess sold the dream of it. And then Ramazani was another signing. So we were able to recruit players that would more than cover the outgoing of Somerville, and across those players we've covered off his goals and more. Jorginho Ruto was the other one, and he was probably the biggest loss in terms of the position he plays and not being easily replaceable. But we had Brendan Aronson, who'd had a year out on loan, and he's come back and he's done okay. He's not been as good as Ruter. He's not been as exciting to watch, but generally speaking, across the season, he's had a sort of a 6-7 out of 10 season, and he's ultimately got the job done for us. So overall, it feels like the squad this year is actually stronger and more balanced than it was last year. Which, given you look on paper at having sold over £100 million of the footballers, you imagine it's going to be difficult to kind of paper over those cracks. But actually, with some sensible bits of recruitment, people like Joe Rothwell in midfield on loan that has come in and has done a brilliant job for us in a position where last year maybe we were a little bit lacking.
You spoke before about the slightly chaotic nature of certainly Victor Orta's spell at Leeds, and how the 49ers have just been sensible. I think another characteristic of their ownership so far has been how little you hear from them. Certainly Parag Marate, who's supposedly leading this takeover at Rangers, I know he does the odd bit for like football finance forums and things like that, but in terms of actual Leeds United statements, they're few and far between. Do you think that's been a welcome feature of the ownership?
It probably is, really. I mean, tend to be of the opinion that there aren't really many good owners in football, because you tend to get people are in it for either for their own vanity, their own money, or you're into some sort of nation state sports washing enterprise, and none of those are particularly great. But I think the thing is, the 49ers they're here to generate money. They're here to generate return for investors. And them sort of taking a back seat on a lot of this stuff it has felt quite welcome to a large part. It did feel like, at Leeds over the years, we've had Ken Bates, we've had Massimo Cellino, we've had some very high profile, abysmal owners who would put themselves front and centre all the time. So to have it as just been some stuff that happens in the background, it's kind of been fine. I suppose where questions will be asked is if we don't push on to the next stage, and people will then want to hear why we're not signing another striker, why we're not replacing the goalkeeper. That's when I guess there's maybe a bit of a void that people will feel need to fill in. But as it is, we've had a couple of good years, falling short last year, but ultimately their aim has been achieved. We've got out of this league while we've still got the parachute payments in place, which is when you need to get out, really. So yeah, overall, I've not really got any complaints other than the complaints about all football club owners, which are that they tend to want something back at some stage.
And Chris, I think you spoke before about just the goldfish bowl nature of Glasgow as a footballing city. Will the 49ers be allowed to get away with a low-profile approach, I suppose?
From a press perspective and from my own media perspective, I hope they are very chatty, and there's press conferences and their statements every week, because that's good for business. But I think ultimately you're judged on your actions as well as your words, and if they are successful, if they run the club in the right way in a business sense, if they run the club the right way in a sporting sense, I think the fans will be more than happy to not see statements and press conferences and stuff. And if they turn up just for the AGM, they provide the odd update here and there, I think the fans will get away with that. Rangers as a club, there's a lot of noise round about it. There's a lot of media interest, obviously, a lot of supporter interest and comment. And I think a period of actually just operating like a normal football club, operating like a normal big football club, would actually be quite welcome at Rangers, because it always seems to be this. There's always something on the go. Now they're not the only club, obviously, that's got that round about them. But I think after the last 10, 15 years or so that Rangers have had a period of quiet normality and just doing things properly, operating well in a business sense, operating successfully in a football sense, I think the fans would certainly take that as a bit of a welcome change.
And there's obviously optimism around this takeover at Rangers, but Michael, from a Leeds perspective, is it concerning really that this is rumbling away while Leeds prepare to try to survive in the top flight?
It was certainly being talked about a lot more when we had a few draws in a row and it looked like Sheffield United were overtaking us. There was definitely a bit of, whether deserved or not, a bit of, they're taking their eye off the ball here. Now, whether that's a fair accusation outside of a transfer window is like, what do you expect an owner to necessarily do when you're suffering some bad form in March? It's not necessarily an awful lot they can impact there. I suppose it remains to be seen really where exactly this goes, because there's always a suspicion that is this them looking to move out of Leeds, and are they looking to bring in some new ownership at Leeds as a way of funding this? So it does leave us slightly in the air, I suppose. But I suppose in Leeds and Rangers, you've got two fan bases who are likely to be fairly vigilant of owners, given the history that we've both had in the last sort of 20 years. So I don't think there's much scope for them being allowed to take their eye off the ball. I think people will notice pretty quickly if on the Rangers side or the Leeds side things are not hitting expectations.
I think that's a pretty good way to segue into the future and how it might work with the 49ers overseeing both clubs. Chris, have you been privy to any sort of behind-the-scenes talks where it's been brought up what the relationship would be, and where I know there's been lots of chat where Rangers fans talking to me about how they're going to be the top dogs now under this regime. Have you got any sense of what the relationship might be?
I think that like any feeder club stance, that was something that that attracted a lot of debate and a lot of speculation quite early on. And as you say, who's going to be number one in that particular pecking order? No, will Rangers be a feeder club for Leeds? Will Leeds be a feeder club for Rangers? Are they both going to be equal partners? I think ultimately both clubs will run obviously by the same main influencers and by some of the same money, but both clubs have their own fan bases, own challenges to go and try and attack. So I think that you will see best practice shared. I'm sure there's other multi-club models obviously around the game where even goes even further than best practice. It goes to sharing coaches and staff and obviously players if we move around on loan. We may well see that down the line, but I think it was made clear early on this will not be a case of a feeder club situation. No, they have their own interests in Leeds that manage to achieve one of those aims in terms of Premier League football. They will have their own aims in Rangers in terms of Champions League football. And I think from a Rangers perspective, I mentioned earlier on about some of the other areas you're looking at, medical, sports science, recruitment, scouting, commercial, marketing, PR. All of these things I think will be on the table for them. Can they come in and find marginal gains in every area to take Rangers up a level, take Rangers forward? There may well be things that Leeds do behind the scenes in any of these areas that they feel they can incorporate into Rangers. You may find there's ways of doing business at Rangers that they think, well, actually, that's quite a good idea. Let's try that down at Ellen Road. So I think that there will be obviously some sort of a relationship between the two clubs, but it won't be a case of Rangers are short of a striker, just go and pick one from the Leeds reserve side and send him up the road. I don't see it getting to that stage. I think the two clubs will still operate fairly independently, even though also there are these ties at boardroom level now.
I can't see the fan bases of either club willing to accept being second place in this particular pecking order. It's they're both. Rangers are an enormous club in what's a very small league, and so the quality of it is not up to the standard of the Premier League, but the Champions League. If Rangers are in the Champions League and we are 20th in the Premier League, there's an argument to say, well, Rangers is the better club to be at there at that point. So I see there may be some transfer of players between, but it doesn't feel like although we are part owned by them now, it doesn't feel like we're entering like a Red Bull City Football Group system here where there's going to be a constant churn of players between.
Because I know, Michael, you've spoken about your scepticism of that model and multi-club and the square ball have sort of been quite protective of what Leeds United is. Obviously, I mean, it's Leeds United, it's an institution. But what is the fear that this could lead to, I suppose?
I mean, the reason I dislike a multi-club model in general, I don't think it's something that should exist in football, truthfully. I think each club should be allowed to prosper or fail on their own merits and for the benefit of that fan base and for no one else. Like the idea of, I know it's often smaller clubs that get taken over, but there are, if you get someone, Man City come in and take over your club, and you might only get 5,000 people there, but there's still a fan base that exists prior to that and that have their own dreams and where they want to be. They don't want to just be a place that someone gets sent on loan. It might make them more successful in the short term, but for me, that's not really what I want from football. Maybe not everyone's the same on this, but I don't particularly like the idea of multi-club models, but they are unfortunately a thing that's here to stay, it seems.
And Chris, I suppose just an easy one. What is the time frame for the 49ers' success?
12 months' time, they have to have something big and silver and shiny in a trophy cabinet at Ibrox. That's ultimately that's what they will be judged on. That's how their first season will be judged on. I think the first challenge for them is to lay out their plans to the Rangers fans. There's so much work that needs done on this squad heading into the summer transfer window, both in and out. Some big decisions need to be made, managerial wise, obviously being the most important one. So I think they come in with not a lot of scepticism. I think they come in with a bit of a feel-good factor behind them. That feel-good factor will only remain behind them for as long as the Rangers fans see that they are making the right decisions, that they are going to take the club forward. But they come in, I think, on the front foot, and they could make some really big impressions early on. They appoint a manager that's a popular choice. They give that manager the right backing in the transfer window. that could really get you off and running. Rangers have never really had momentum during recent seasons. They've never had a prolonged feel-good factor, and that's what this takeover actually gives them the chance to have. Now, we've seen it on the videos that we do and on the website. The reaction to normal stories, or transfers or injuries or match stuff, has just not been there of late, because people are just so accustomed to the failure of Rangers in a football sense. The takeover stories, the takeover conversations, they've just given people such a lift and such a feel good factor and such a sense of optimism. That's where the Rangers fans are really putting their hopes and dreams on for everything into the new season.
I feel like they're entering into a situation at Rangers probably not dissimilar to these 2 years at Leeds, where for next year, for example, if we finish anywhere above the relegation places, brilliant. There's even a potential, there's a way you can go down well as well. There's an awful lot of what would constitute success. The past 2 years at Leeds, it's been promotion is success, anything else is failure. And the situation they're going to at Rangers really is above Celtic is success, below Celtic is failure. And that's where they sit forever, essentially, isn't it, at Rangers?
I think that's that, having been through that situation at Leeds, as you've outlined there, Michael, it should give them that knowledge of, I say first is first, second is nowhere in Glasgow. Now, you mentioned there's ways to go down for Leeds. There's almost a way that Rangers could just about get away with not winning the title next season. It's certainly not been 17 points behind with 4 games to go as they are now. If they could put up a more prolonged challenge, if they can show that they are once again competitive in the Old Firm games, if they can have another bit of success in Europe as they have done of late, win one of the cups, if they were to take the title race into the final 2-3 games and then lose by a couple of points, as long as there was enough to allow people to buy into it, they would get that as a pass. It wouldn't be seen as a success, because at Rangers it's not a success if you don't win something, but they could almost get to that stage of that. Now that was okay, but now we have to go again. So that's the situation that they're walking into, and it sounds like, as I say, what you've outlined there, they should be well aware and feel like they're familiar with that situation now.
Yeah, I think until the takeover goes through and we actually see the state of play and how the relationship does exist and how the two clubs move forward, it's difficult to tell. But I think that's been really enlightening from both of you to get a sense of what the 49ers have done at Leeds and what Rangers fans might be able to expect. So thank you both. That's all we've got time for. And thank you for listening. Remember, we're here with new episodes of the Scottish Football Podcast bright and early every day. So make sure you don't miss out. Subscribe on BBC Sounds and get your push notifications turned on. And until tomorrow, goodbye.
Sir Alex Ferguson is the most successful British manager of all time.
Nobody is above him or this football club.
So how did an apprentice toolmaker from Glasgow become one of the most iconic figures in sporting history?
His strength of character, his determination, the fight in him.
He can be persuasive, he can be charming, he can be frightening.
I'm Kelly Cates, and this is Sporting Giants Sir Alex Ferguson.
I didn't want to feel, I couldn't feel.
Listen on BBC Sounds.